Our weekly immigration news roundup is brought to you by the law firm of Figueroa and Associates. For a consultation on any immigration or legal matter, please call 855-768-8845. That's 855-768-8845. For full stories and more immigration news, visit www.theimmigrantsjournal.com. That's www.theimmigrantsjournal.com.
Hello, my name is Ashley Dawkins, legal assistant at the law firm of Figueroa and Associates and your presenter with this week's immigration news. We begin with, nationally, unrealistic immigration demands complicate treacherous House budget talks. Unless Congress can come up with an agreement on the budget by November 17th, the government will shut down, forcing tens of thousands of federal employees to work without any pay and suspending vital programs around the country. Right now, the biggest obstacle is the lack of a Speaker of the House. No bill can pass without one. But even if the House, GOP, or both parties jointly pick a speaker, another issue is threatening to cause an impasse. Republicans demand to include radical changes to immigration law as a condition of funding the government. There's no doubt that Congress needs to act. States and cities across the U.S. continue to struggle with newly arrived immigrants who lack housing or support in the United States. And while funding for NGOs, state, and local programs is helpful, this problem will persist if there's no centralized response from Congress. That's why, rather than grandstanding about border policy changes, Congress needs to think through pragmatic solutions. Lost in AI translation. Growing reliance on language apps jeopardizes some asylum applications. The U.S. immigration system has said it will provide migrants with a human interpreter as needed. In reality, refugee organizations say many are frequently left without access to one. Instead, the various agencies that make up the U.S. immigration system, and even some refugee and organizations, increasingly rely on AI-powered translation tools like Google Translate and Microsoft Translator to bridge that gap. Problems with the translation tools occur throughout the asylum process, from border stations to detention centers to immigration courts, said several volunteers at Respond Crisis Translation. The CBP One app, which Biden administration has mandated anyone seeking asylum to use to schedule an appointment with CBP before entering the country, is translated into only a handful of languages. And even then, in those translations, errors appear. The version of Frequently Asked Questions section of the app in Haitian Creole, for instance, largely shows a string of letters with no spaces or the necessary accent marks. Meanwhile, Open Borders disinformation increases migration to the border, new poll of Central American reveals. New polling and research recently released by Americans Voice makes clear that pervasive disinformation about open borders, including the U.S. right-wing politicians and media, contributes to Central American migration to the U.S. The poll is first of its kind survey of 600 Central Americans in the prime migration age cohort living in El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Among the findings, more than a quarter recalling hearing a U.S. politician say the border is open in the past 6 months. As reporter and longtime border chronicler Alfredo Corchado writes in an exclusive about the new research in the Dallas Morning News, quote, "The poll obtained by the Dallas Morning News indicates many Central American residents are encouraged to travel to the U.S.-Mexican border based on false narratives. 1 in 4 Central American respondents said they have heard that the border is open, and nearly 1 in 5 respondents said that they believe the term open borders and believe most migrants can apply for asylum if they make the trip." New York Asylum Office rejects valid asylum seekers just to save time. Draconian and toxic work conditions have led asylum officers to reject legally sound asylum claims, found a report by the Safe Harbor Clinic at Brooklyn Law after an investigation. The findings are based on the experiences of 11 former asylum seekers, 1 former immigration judge, 22 immigration attorneys, and 7 asylum seekers. At 1065 Stewart Ave, Suite 200, the New York Asylum Office, upper management pressures asylum officers to focus on speed as much as possible, even assessing their performance by how quickly they can complete asylum decisions, thereby creating a culture of fear. As New York City evicts migrants from shelters, work permits stall. Some New York City legal service providers are worried that the Adams administration's recent policy of evicting thousands of migrants from homeless shelters after 30 or 60 days and making them reapply for housing could create additional challenges for those eligible for work authorization. A solution state and city officials say is critical to alleviating a crowded shelter system. City Hall's new requirement could mean applicants don't have a stable address where the federal government can send them immigration paperwork, according to several nonprofit groups. Single migrant adults have to reapply for shelter after 30 days, and families with children in shelters run by New York City Health and hospitals are limited to 60-day stays. And finally, migrants offered tickets out of New York City, indefinite wait for housing as crisis crashes shelter system. Migrants ousted from city shelters due to new time limits are being offered free tickets out of New York, or being sent to so-called waiting rooms at local shelters with no reassurance they'll get a new bed. The latest sign says the crisis is crashing the city's social safety net. Thank you.
Our weekly immigration news roundup is brought to you by the law firm of Figueroa & Associates. For a consultation on any immigration or legal matter, please call 855-768-8845. That's 855-768-8845. For full stories and more immigration news, visit www.theimmigrantsjournal.com. That's www.theimmigrantsjournal.com.